Hi, welcome to another segment of the Healthy Aging Network. I'm Kathy Tutt, and today we're going to be talking about caregiving burnout, and what it means to people in our community. Stay tuned. Hi, I'm Kathy Tutt. Welcome back. I'm the Family Consumer Sciences Educator with Ohio State University Extension in Clark County. Today we're going to be talking with Laura Akgerman about caregiving and all the different facets associated with that. So Laura, can you start out by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I am the Disability Services Coordinator for OSU Extension and Ohio AgrAbility. And Ohio AgrAbility Project is a national program from the USDA. We work with farmers with disabilities, providing education, assistance, support to help them either return to farming or continue farming with a disability.
Great. So today we wanted to talk about caregivers, and not only just with older adults, but in general in our population. So can you start out, first of all, by telling me, we know that there are a lot of people who do caregiving, and we're talking in the majority about family caregivers.
Yes.
So could you tell me about how many people in Ohio that affects?
Well, the numbers I have are from 2014. They're from the AARP Ohio and the National Alliance for Caregiving. But in 2014, there were 1,700,000 caregivers, family caregivers, just in Ohio.
So that seems like a lot, right?
Seems like a lot.
You know, and I was listening to the news the other night. They were talking about the population in Ohio and how we are just aging, and the impact that's going to be within the next 10, 15 years in Ohio. So if we're thinking about putting a dollar amount on that, because we know, the caregiving is very, very expensive, but if we put a dollar amount on our family caregivers, do you know approximately what that would be in Ohio?
Be at about $17.5 million, and again, that was 6 years ago, so I'm sure it's probably more by now.
Wow, so yeah, that's a lot of time and money that people are spent with dedicated to their families. So a lot of times, too, our family caregivers aren't necessarily, that's not their primary role, right?
No, it says that 74% of family caregivers have worked at a paying job sometime during their caregiving experience, so they could still be working full-time and caregiving all the rest of the time.
Wow. So,
yes.
And we've heard of that the verbiage of the sandwich generation, which is a lot of us find ourselves in that, where, I personally have a teenage son at home, and I have a mother who has Parkinson's disease. So I catch myself right in the middle of that sandwich generation, where we're being pushed from both sides and trying to work full time. So it can be, a pretty big burden on us. What about these people who are working? Do you know any information about what they may need to do as far as their work? I mean, how do they balance all of that?
I know some of them have to take time off work. We have 19% of retirees, 19% of people retired early to care for an ill spouse or family member. Nearly 7 in 10 caregivers have made accommodations at work, whether leaving work early, cutting back on hours, taking leaves of absence, or they have received warnings about their performance or attendance because of the impact of the caregiving duties.
Wow, so that really sounds like, it can impact businesses as well, right? It's not just us as employees or caregivers, but also with our businesses.
It's estimated at $33.6 billion yearly lost in the U.S. In productivity from workers.
Wow, so that's like absenteeism or
just being so exhausted that you can't
stressed and having your mind on other things,
thinking about having to leave suddenly in the day. Yes,
right, for sure, sure. So can you tell me anything else? We know that a lot of times caregiving is very rewarding, right? We get to spend time with people that we really love and we care about. We can see making an impact on the people that we love. So what are the numbers? Do you have numbers for Ohio as far as people with disabilities and what that might look like?
So in general, when you're talking about disabilities, we're talking about visible disabilities, someone who's paralyzed, uses a wheelchair, a walker, and also invisible disabilities, vision, mental health, cognitive, hearing, seeing, etc. So when I looked at the Cornell University does a survey every year. It's a very nice disability census. And for Ohio, I believe this was maybe 2017, 65 to 74-year-old people, 25% of them had a disability of some sort. And then within that 65 to 74-year-old range, self-care, so inability to care for themselves was almost 7%, and then living independently was 4%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but actually that's still quite a lot. When then you look at 75% and higher, we go from the 65 to 74-year-old age range at about a 25% of people. When they're 75 years or higher, you're closer to half, 48, almost 49% of people that have some form of a disability. The self-care and not being able to take care of yourself is almost 25%, and then living independently, it's 12% of people.
Wow, so
That's a lot.
Some of the disability goes along with maybe the aging process, right?
Yes.
And just the normal decline of aging.
As you're aging and as your sight, your vision, your balance, certainly, and just your fine motor skills, your cognition, all of those things, they unfortunately do start to decline as you get older. That's just a natural process of it.
Right. So I can't even imagine the magnitude of people. Our baby boomers are all going to be hitting that age range here pretty soon. So it's something that's very relevant for us.
Yes.
So I said earlier that it can be very, very rewarding to be a caregiver, but there are also some downsides to it. So we're not just talking about missed time at work or absenteeism, but how else does it affect the family or the caregiver itself?
Well, if you said you're part of the sandwich generation, you don't have as much time to spend with your kids or your husband, and so it takes away from family time, can take away from friendships because you're caring for your mother. Until last year I called myself the case manager for my dad. My sister was the case manager, but it does take away a lot of time. It's very rewarding and you're glad to do it, but it can be isolating because you're there with them, and depending on their level of function, they may not be able to be alone at all, or you're constantly calling to check on them. Physically, it can be very, very strenuous on you, just lifting. There were points I had to lift my dad up, and I was scared to death I was going to drop him. I did not. But it can be very, very physically strenuous, and especially when you figure, as we get older, we lose muscle mass, we lose muscle tone, so we're not as young and strong as we used to be. That can be part of it. You make very, very personal, you help them with very personal activities, using the restroom, taking a shower. So it's a very different role. You have become your mother's caregiver in some ways.
Right.
So the roles get flipped, and then you're still a mother to your kids.
Right. So, and that's a lot of the research talks about this role reversal that we have, where we go from, our parents taking care of us to now all of a sudden we are taking care of them.
Yes.
It can be even more challenging when we have an older adult who all of a sudden is afraid of losing their independence, and we have to we're the people who step in to take care of that, and they can even sometimes seem very angry at us or frustrated with us.
Yeah.
When it's truly they're frustrated with the situation at hand. They're frustrated with their
experienced that, yes.
potential. Yeah.
It is frustrating, and I can see why it would be so frustrating. My dad was always the dad and strong, and then roles got flipped, and it was hard.
Yes.
It's very hard.
Yep. And so we also have, some of our the numbers that talk about the people who are caregivers. The majority of the caregivers, are they men? Are they women? How does that usually work out?
I believe it's frequently women. Yeah, that's a whole other show where we can talk about why it's the women. But I think a lot of times, especially maybe in a married couple, I think that we just take that on. Women, we care too much.
Right. Yeah. And
not too much.
Right.
But I think that's a lot of women do take that on. And then professionals, you do hear that professional caregivers are frequently also women.
Right. Yeah, I think I read somewhere it's like 60% of our caregivers are women.
I believe it.
Due in part because of, husbands and men usually die, before their wives do, with the stresses of society that's placed on them or has traditionally been in the past. And then a lot of times the daughter or the daughter-in-law are the ones who step into that role.
Yes.
Just simply I think it's sometimes by default or by our caring affiliation that we have with people. So going back to thinking about how it affects our workforce, we know that there are a lot of people who are caregiving. About 34 billion each year are due to a loved one who needs care. People taking off time, work, because a loved one needs care. And then 10% of our family caregivers go from full-time to part-time jobs because of the need to care for their loved one. So as we think about this, can you tell me just a little bit more about any help or supports out there for people who have or who find themselves in this role?
There are a lot of supports, and actually we are planning a workshop Saturday, February 22nd. We have formed the Caregiver Support Network. It's Ohio AgrAbility, OSU Extension, Martha S. Pitzer Center for Women, Children, and Youth, and the OSU College of Nursing, and Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities. We came together last fall and started planning this workshop, which has now been going to turn into a series of workshops and webinars because there's so much demand. But we were calling it the Caregiver Support Network because just like any person with a disability or any other special condition, no one can understand you like someone else that's in your position. I work with farmers with disabilities every day. I love it. I'm not a farmer and I don't have a disability, so I empathize, I work for them, but another farmer with a disability can really connect. Another caregiver who's caring for a spouse, a child, an adult child with developmental disabilities or another disability, they can really connect. So our hope with this workshop is to bring people together. And we're going to make it a little bit different. When we first started planning, we thought, oh, weekday workshop all day in Columbus. And somebody who might have been you said, you know, caregivers aren't going to be able to get away for an entire day to come to Columbus. Oh, yeah. So we switched it to Saturday, and they said, it's still Columbus. And so we have got it in 7 sites across the state. We are hosting our speakers in Columbus, but we're going to be we've got sites in Akron, Athens, Caldwell, Fremont, Lebanon, and Ottawa. And they're going to be at extension offices or county health offices, Ohio Means Jobs offices throughout the state. We're going to have extension educators, volunteers and staff from the National Alliance of Mental Illness, Alzheimer's Association, Department of Developmental Disabilities. I apologize to anybody who I forgot, but we're going to have a lot of different facilitators at each site. The FCS educators from the Mindful Wellness team will also be there teaching us relaxation and stress relief techniques, because I think that will be great. When someone brought that up, I thought, that is perfect. Just bring your heart rate down, bring your breathing down, and just to teach some people. But the idea is we're going to have the speakers in Columbus. We'll be live streaming them. Our first speaker is going to talk about caregiver burnout, and she is a phenomenal counselor. I'm on a committee with her, and she is terrific. She's got a very strength-based approach, and she's going to work with attendees on developing an action plan for managing your burnout, for setting goals. We're going to talk about telemedicine. And for those that aren't familiar, you could be in your home using a phone or an internet connection, speaking with a healthcare provider who's somewhere else. And that is wonderful for people who maybe don't have great transportation, or it's hard to get your caregiver, your loved one, out of the house to an appointment, or you just have a quick question that you just want answered, or look at this wound on his arm, do I need to do something about it? And that's terrific that they have that. They've also got a very strong telepsych, I think, so counseling. So it's really, because a lot of areas of the state don't have great resources for mental health. So I'm really excited to hear Philip talk. And then lastly, we've got a speaker on gadgets, tech, and helpful apps for the caregiver, which Kyle is from the Department of Developmental Disabilities, and they have a number of apps. I want to say monitoring your loved one, and not like in a Big Brother way.
Like remote monitoring.
Remote monitoring, so that if you're at work, you can check in on someone, and not only increases your peace of mind, it also increases their independence because they can be there and they can interact with you through the gadgets.
Yeah, I can remember, you know, at our display that we have in the fall.
Yes.
We had like a burner. It's a motion detector burner. So if you have a parent or loved one that may have some cognitive disabilities, or if we're looking at dementia, these burners are set in place that if there's no movement around them for 20 minutes,
they'll go off.
they automatically turn themselves off, which helps prevent fires. There's also some things like an elopement system, where if they leave the house at any point in time, there's an alert sent to a children's phone.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
I'm expecting to hear things like that and that's great because you just think about how it increases their independence and even your independence.
right. It's that peace of mind,
yes.
knowing that you can go to work
Yes.
and, you know, kind of focus on work as well.
Yes. One of the most exciting things that I have to put in, we're going to have them in local sites and we have facilitators at them because after the speaker finishes, they're going to offer some questions, but then you and the other facilitators are going to have a really good conversation locally. And so you'll be talking about the caregiver burnout. So we're hoping that it helps people to develop connections.
Yeah, it's the whole idea of that network, right?
Yes, they're
Yeah.
going to learn about extension. Maybe they're not familiar with extension, but are familiar with their area agency on aging. So they're going to learn about all these different organizations that help. They're going to meet other people. And then at the end of it, after our telemedicine and gadgets speakers, we're going to go to the best thing. I think it's the best thing where we're going to talk about local resources. So not
Absolutely.
what does Columbus have, because Columbus has it all, but what is in Ottawa if you had an adult who needed incontinence supplies. Maybe there's a church or a food pantry that has that. So I think it's going to be really wonderful. Everybody will be sharing their very local resources, and I know people are going to learn about resources they weren't aware of.
Right.
And I'm hoping that the organizations that were there might see some gaps and think how they can fill them. So I think that's going to be one of the best things that comes out of this,
Yes.
and making connections.
Yes, I'm so excited about this
too.
conversation that's going to take
too.
place with that. So do you have information on how someone can join this,
Yes.
join the network?
It's called the Caregiver Support Network, and I believe we're going to put a link up on screen where you can go for registration. We have a website that has a lot of information, talks about the speakers and what they're going to talk about. It has our agenda. It has a really great list of resources with extension resources and the mindful wellness, AgrAbility, Department of Developmental Disabilities, all the Area Agency on Aging websites. And another thing that we're doing at this workshop that I think will be really neat, we've put an opportunity out there for exhibitors, so organizations to come and set up a table and share their resources. And I'm so excited about this. I've had so many phone calls and emails and people that really want to get involved. So I think it's going to be even better than we're expecting, and we have very high expectations.
Right.
But I think it's going to be terrific. In fact, I have already tentatively scheduled the next two workshops. They'll be Saturdays, April 25th and November 14th. Don't worry, November 14th is an away football game. That's why we had to select that.
Okay.
Because we all know when someone said, well, we could still have it in Columbus. Clearly you have never been in Columbus.
Right.
On a football game day. I live in Columbus. I don't even want to be there unless I'm going to the game, which I am. And November is also Caregiver Appreciation Month, which is why a fun time that we wanted to have it during that month.
Awesome.
So I can't wait to see how big and how even better and better and better it is as we come into April and November.
That's awesome. That's so exciting.
Yeah.
So another tool that I have used quite often in my teaching is something called Prepare to Care. It's through AARP.
Okay.
It's a nice little booklet for people to have to look through and use with their families. The network, the workshop that we're going to have is fantastic, but this is actually a hands-on tool that you can get.
Wonderful.
You can order it through AARP, and it is free.
Good.
It has all different kinds of information in there. So first step is starting this conversation. You have a loved one, you know that there are some things going on that you need to address. And so how do you start the conversation with your parent? And I talked a little bit earlier about how difficult that can be when they know that they're going to lose their independence. So how do you start that? How do you look for that opening for them? The next thing, and this is also in that caregiving workshop, is getting your team together. Who has strengths in what area? Who can help provide the most support in which thing? So you may have someone who can take off work during the day and go to doctor's appointments. You may have someone who is great with finances, and that person could be the person who takes over paying the bills. You might have someone who's a great manager, and they're going to manage caregivers coming in and out of the house. And so that is very important to do that. And then the next thing is just putting the plan out there, making those schedules, making sure that you have everyone aligned with where they're going to be and who they're going to work with, are all the important parts of that. We do know that a lot of times caregiving, people step into the caregiving role because a crisis has occurred. And the best thing that you can do for your family is to plan ahead for this. If we wait until after a crisis, there are a lot of times that decisions are made in a hurried way. We end up facing, marketing people at the nursing homes or in facilities without making the best decision for us and for our family. So we end up spending a lot of money for things that don't need to be there. The other part of that too is that after a crisis occurs, we may not be making the decision that our parents wanted.
Yes.
Which leads to a lot of self-doubt for children. It can also lead to a lot of sibling rivalry with children when they don't agree on what steps to take. So making those plans and having something actually in writing for your family is going to be paramount to helping you through this. So
I'm looking forward to you speaking about that in April or November, because
right.
I have heard you speak about it before, and it was right before my dad passed, and I thought, oh my gosh, I wish we'd known this a couple years ago. It's hard. You are so reactive.
Yes.
When you're making these decisions, and it's hard.
Yes.
Yes.
And the other part, I talk about making sure that it's in writing.
Yes.
Because there are so many things that my mother told me that she wanted things done a certain way. But again, when she was faced with a health crisis or losing her independence, she fought me on those decisions that she previously told me to do. And so if I would have had this stuff in writing from her, I would have known, number one, that I was making the right decisions, and number two, my brothers would have known that I was making the decisions based on what she wanted.
Yeah.
It would just make it a lot easier for me and for all of us in the end.
Yes.
So I really appreciate you taking time with us today. I think that this topic is one that all of us are going to be tuned into it at some point in time. I read somewhere that at some point in time, there are 4 kinds of people in the world. So one is those who have been caregivers, right? The second one are those who are currently caregivers. And then those who will be caregiving, or those who need a caregiver. And so this topic is one that, we talk about. Our workshop is one that's just going to be expanding and growing, and we are so excited to be a part of this at Ohio State so that we can reach out. I love the idea of your network and it being throughout the state of Ohio so that no matter where you are, you can be tuned into this, in our hopes to reach as many people as we possibly can.
And I'm hoping in April and November we will be able to expand the sites, because I've had a number of people call that say, I'm so happy you're going to be there, but I'm still an hour away from any of the closest sites. And I'm like, oh, if it wasn't 2 weeks before, we could add a site. Mm-hmm. So we will definitely I will be putting out the call to my extension colleagues who wants to host. My goal is to have one in every one of the 88 counties.
Yes, that would be
by
great.
November. I think that's reasonable, don't you?
I do.
Yes.
I think that it's doable as long as you give people a heads up. And
November, that's a long way. That's a long way away.
It is, yes. It sure is. But yes.
Gotta dream big, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Well, we thank you so much. If anyone needs to contact you, we will have the information up on the board. If they want to reach you about Ohio AgrAbility, or if they want to reach me about any of the aging programs that we offer throughout the state of Ohio, I am more than happy to be a part of that. So stay tuned for our next session, and we will see you soon. Thank you.